Well, Bennett, thank you for freeing up some time to have a chat with us and answer some questions for us and the Benelux community. To start off, could you tell me something about yourself, what it is you do at Arkane, and what your role is?
Right. Well, thanks for having me. My name is Bennett Smith. I am a narrative designer and the lead voiceover director for Arkane Leon. And I most recently worked on the game Deathloop.
And this must be a very busy period for you, because the game is releasing in like, a little bit longer than a month.
Yeah. No. So we're definitely wrapping it up and putting all the little extra polish, whatever we can sort of fit in there before the game gets launched. And yeah, we're really excited to get it out there into the world and have players get their hands on it.
I can imagine. Exciting few weeks left.
Yes.
So the first question I did wanted to ask, and I was wondering, what is your favorite Arkane game that you've worked on so far?
Right. Yeah. So I originally was doing more voiceover direction, so I actually worked on a lot of Arkane games. But I gotta say, my favorite was Prey. I really enjoyed working on that game. I think it was a lot of fun. I actually really enjoyed the game too. It's one of the games where I tell people, I'm like, have you played this game? You really should. It's actually quite special. I think it's a lot of fun to play, and I feel like it kind of flew under the radar a little bit. But yeah, I really enjoyed working on that game, and you know, for those who aren't familiar, you're basically navigating the space station, and you sort of are finding out what happened on the space station. Something went wrong, as they do, and you get to sort of like you get to sort of piece together these people's lives who lived on the space station before the accident, and it was a lot of fun working on that project.
I can imagine, and I really loved the intro of Prey. I thought it was really cool, the realization that things were not like how they appeared to be, which was really amazing.
Yeah, I think it was true to sort of Arkane spirit, which is a lot of, we give the player sort of the tools and they let them explore how they want, and the players just sort of, you need to explore your way through that first level to figure out what's going on. So I really enjoyed that. Exactly.
And speaking about unique, I thought that the DLC, the Moon Crash, was really unique as well. It was really something different from the main game. So
yeah, exactly. And I think that, yeah, again, that's sort of like, even though Arkane Austin is, you know, we share the name, but some of our DNA is definitely like shared as well. And I think that for them was like it was definitely a challenge, and they tried something different. And I think that's what Deathloop is too. It's definitely a deviation from what we did previously. We're constantly attempting to kind of push the boundaries and really, you know, advance the sort of immersive sim art form and just see where we can take it. So yeah, and I think Deathloop is no exception to that.
Totally. So yeah, let's talk about Deathloop. In Deathloop as a project, how did the whole idea for Deathloop as a game started?
Right. So it's a little bit before my time, but from hearsay, I can tell you that I think the idea of, you know, they had this this sort of system. It's more of like a mechanic in Dishonored, where, you know, you have to go and assassinate this person there, and then this person there, and that advances the story. And I think the sort of genesis of this Deathloop idea was, well, what if we had to do it in one day, and you had to like be very clever about how the order to do it in. And I think that's kind of the sort of initial idea of where sort of Deathloop started.
And the next question: what are you most excited about personally about Deathloop and the project?
Yeah, so like I said, we tried some different things. I think tonally we really shifted this game into a more humorous. It's kind of like this like darkly funny sort of game. Because you know, at its face value, like, I'm sure you've seen some of the trailers and stuff, it's like this character wakes up and everyone's trying to kill them, and they're trapped on this island, and the island's not even a tropical island, it's like this like freezing cold island. It's like, you know, there's a lot of things going against him, and you know, to craft this character Colt, we really sort of had a lot of fun with him. And I gotta give props also to the actor Jason Kelly, who brought his own sort of like flavor to the character and to the experience, and we really tried to make it like, you know, no matter what you throw at Colt, he's never like phased, which is sort of like what a player feels like too. You know, a player picks up a controller, they're never like, I'm just gonna lose. They're like, no, I'm gonna beat this. And so we tried to imbue that attitude into the character Colt. So, and we also tried to align what the character Colt knows with what the player knows. So they kind of travel together through the game, and sort of unravel the mystery and figure out the puzzle, the murder puzzle as we call it, and they have fun doing it. It's like, despite all the odds being against him, he really enjoys sort of figuring it out. So that was kind of fun for us. And I think like we've gotten a lot of positive feedback about that. So I'm hoping like players really get to enjoy playing as Colt and sort of like, you know, navigating through our world and experiencing it.
Yeah, I'm sure they will, and that's the thing as well. That what I think about the game, because the concept is really cool, but the story is also a bit, or the mechanic is also a bit complex. So I can imagine that it's also for you as a narrative designer a challenge, you know, to tell that to the players as well. What you want to tell.
Yeah, and you know, it's like, even though like we've done some different things, this is more of like a sort of first-person shooter than maybe some of our other games have been. We definitely still really place an emphasis on player choice and like emergent player behavior and solutions. So yeah, that was very tricky because the player, we kind of like give the player a bit of a sort of entry into the world, and then we like let them free, and they can kind of go in any direction they want. And so it was a challenge to try and figure out, how do we pace this story so we can still tell like a cohesive story when we give the player all this choice. And so we have some little tricks that we've done in order to make that work. There's certain, you know, choke points that kind of after a certain amount of things the players solved, we kind of like, you know, the player gets a little more information about like the main storyline, so they're never too lost in the campaign. So yeah, but it's always a challenge, and I think the players who really want to get involved in the story, they should take their time like navigating through it, because we are allowing the speedrunners to get in there and just blast through it as fast as they can. And they can do all kinds of weird stuff. Like, we can't control if a player like walks backwards into a room. But if they do that, they might miss some narrative content or something. So, you know, I think for the players who want to experience the story, like, it's there, and it can be really rewarding if they take their time with it. But we also allow players just to like fly through it if they want.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I'm personally, I'm really curious to see what happens after the game releases, because I'm sure you guys have like some kind of expectations what speedrunners might achieve in the game. But you know, and I know that the community always comes up with like these crazy ideas in game, and even set like these crazy records. So really curious on that front to see what happens.
I won't reveal anything, but we've already seen some speedrunners from Bethesda take a spin, and so we have a sort of baseline. So we're seeing how fast they can get, but yeah, I won't reveal how fast they're doing it right now, but pretty quick.
Do you have like personal records under your
the
dev team as well?
Well, honestly, I mean, I wish I had the time to speedrun. I'm mostly going through the game right now and just making sure all the scenes work, and so I'm doing it at a much slower pace. But I think there's probably some people internally who are pushing the boundaries with it. So we'll see.
I'm sure they are. Cool. Yeah, and what was for you the hardest challenge on working on Deathloop as a narrative designer?
Yeah, it goes back to sort of what I was saying earlier, where when you give the player maximum choice, it's really trying to figure out how to make sure that they don't get lost in the sort of big picture, in the grand scheme of things with the story. So yeah, for us, that was really a challenge figuring that out. But we've come up with a couple of different things that we're doing in the game. Like, for instance, Juliana, who kind of plays our main antagonist in the game. Oh, this is actually kind of cool. Like, so one of the things, if you play like a sci-fi game, you'll typically run into the friendly helper robot character, right? And so he's like, let me tell you what's happening. And Juliana is kind of that, but she's also trying to kill you. So it's like, she's not a robot either, just no spoilers, but yeah, so we kind of spun that idea of the friendly character on your head. So she's helping explain the world to you, but she's also trying to kill you at the same time. So that's kind of like a fun dynamic to explore. And one of the things that happens is as the players play the game, she'll call you up on like this little like walkie-talkie radio thing and be like, and she'll react to things that you did maybe in the previous map or things that you've learned. And so she kind of helps like guide you along, like I said, even though she's trying to kill you. So that's kind of a fun, interesting dynamic to play between two characters. And again, it's like spinning that sort of helpful tutorial character on their head a little bit.
Yeah, because she is one of the few that Colt can actually talk to, right? So that's an interesting,
Right.
That's right. That's an interesting dynamic, for sure.
Yeah.
And if you compare this project to previous projects that you've worked on, were there any learnings that you took from like the past projects?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things, I mean, we tried, I wanted to do a couple different things performance-wise. Obviously, like I said, I've worked a lot in voiceover direction, so I've seen a lot of different things, I guess you'd say. And so we really tried to push the boundaries a little bit in this game with what we could get away with. And, you know, like, just, it means simple things. It's like, you know, you find a tape in the world, and they typically, I've found, like in games, they can be kind of dry and they're kind of like, you know, informational. It's very rote, and we really try to add like some dynamic kinetic energy to that. And that's definitely kudos to the sound department who has helped us out with that, and they've really done some amazing work over there, really trying to breathe life into these sort of tapes which we have in the world. And you can find all kinds of fun, interesting little stories along the way as you play in Deathloop. And we did some other things too, like for instance, for the radio calls, we actually got Colt and Juliana in the same booth. You know, typically in video game recording, it's sort of siloed, like you kind of just do one actor at a time, and it's just sort of the production process. But for this time, we were able to get them in the booth, and it really, again, breathed some life into the banter of them because they were reacting to each other. And they, in fact, like, you know, the actors Jason Kelly and Ozyomo Gaha, they were able to play off each other. And even though, like, I gave them freedom to sort of like riff, and some of the stuff they came up with like just on the fly as they're bantering, like we ended up using in the game.
Hello, Black Reef. Colt, my predecessor, has been pronounced guilty of treason. He is to be shot on sight henceforth in perpetuity. Your assistance is appreciated and mandatory. The real party doesn't start until he's dead.
She is not making this easy.
So that's the kind of stuff that, you know, you can't typically control you know, in our previous games. It's really, it has to come from the development side. You really have to want to get there, even if it's a little more complicated and it's a little more technically difficult. And so that's one thing we kind of place the premium on, is really trying to push the boundaries of what we were already doing, which is, again, like, this stuff's been done before, but it's just like we're trying to make it somewhat different. We're trying to just, like, you know, breathe some new life into the experience.
Yeah, that's really cool to hear, especially allowing like the creative process to happen, you know, in the booths. And it's actually quite similar as things that I heard from like film productions, that sometimes actors like improvise, and, you know, magical stuff can happen on there. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so the NPCs, the characters are quite unique in the world of Deathloop. So what can you tell the viewers about them without spoiling too much?
Yeah, sure. Well, everyone on the island is there because of this program we call the Eon program. And so they're all there with a sort of collective goal of this experience on this island. So when Colt wakes up in the morning, very quickly Juliana gets on the radio, or the sort of loudspeaker, and is like, Colt's trying to ruin everything. You got to kill him. So everyone on the island is immediately trying to kill you. And so the funny thing is that they've basically set up this experience of like they knew they were going to be in this time loop, and so they are experiencing life without consequence. And so and this kind of takes place over a single day, and at the end of the day it loops. So for all of them, this is just the same day, except they don't really remember what they did yesterday, so they end up repeating themselves every day. So you get to see like some very interesting choices that these characters have made to spend their first day. Some of them are doing really dangerous stuff, and other people are doing very mundane things, and it's up to the player to sort of explore and find out what exactly they're doing. And sometimes this is like informational. You can actually learn something about what's going on in the world, and you can actually learn how to affect it. Like, if you do something, if you're like, well, if I go back in the morning and do that, then this character is going to do something different later in the day, and then I might learn something about that. So there's definitely, that's part of our puzzling element, and some of it is related to the sort of critical path of the main narrative, and some of it is just fun. It's just kind of world building stuff, and some of it is just completely unrelated to anything. It's just like, you get to sort of see what these characters are up to and what they're doing, and we really tried to like breathe life into every single one of these NPCs. Like, they have a purpose, and they have a name, and they have a routine, and it's like they have a place on this island. So
that sounds really
try
good.
to do that as much as possible. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that sounds really good. So we can definitely expect them to do some funny stuff, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
Exactly.
Yeah, and we wanted to ask some questions about the story and the lore as well. So obviously you told me that options and decisions are very important in the game. So how do you make sure that the players interact with the story in the way you intended?
As I said, like, the players, it's up to the players to experience the story how they want it. I think, like, what I like to do, my play style to experience the game, is it's a mixture of stealth and combat, and fast-paced action. So sometimes when I'm trying to like just sort of sneak around, like, you might get to hear some of the interesting sort of story bits. But other times it's like, no, there's 20 guys. I got all my ammo. I got full life. Let's rumble. You know what I mean? Like, and those can both be rewarding experiences within our game.
Yeah, and I think that's really the DNA that you see in the other games as well. In Dishonored and in Prey, that you can play the way you want, whether you want to go in both guns blazing, or if you want to go sneaking and picking them off one by one. I think that's really cool about Arkane games.
Yeah, and I think, well, the difference with Deathloop maybe for those games is that we support the idea of really going in guns blazing a little bit more. And there's fun things that happen. Your gun jams, and there's turrets, and there's grenades and mines, and like all kinds of like chaos. Fireworks will get shot off, and electric there's a lot of electrical boxes and TVs, and they can get blown up. And so yeah, we really support like the big chaos, sort of the fun chaos kind of stuff, maybe more so than some of the previous games where we really kind of lean more on the stealth. But there definitely is, like, you can play stealthy here. Like, it's totally supported, and we even have like a fun kind of nail gun you can use to kind of run around and pick people off. But if you don't hit them in the head, it makes them really mad, and they'll come after you, and then you're deep trouble. So. And
then you have trouble. Yeah, exactly. I'm personally really happy to hear that, because my patience level is like really low, so I like to go in like with all the guns and explosions and stuff like that. So yeah, that's definitely good news for me.
Great.
Cool. Yeah, and the last question already. So how do you make sure the lore makes sense in like the overall narrative? Is it like you work on the overall narrative first and then build like the lore around it, or have you decided on a world and then come up with an overall story? Can you tell us something about how that process and that link between lore and the overall narrative works?
So like I said, like, I think, the genesis of the game was this idea of like doing this perfect day, right? Where you killed everyone in the right order. So based off of that, it was a little bit of reverse engineering, because we had to come up with, okay, this character doesn't want to go here, but what would be a reason for them to go there? Okay, well, she's a scientist, and this is maybe scientifically interesting, and how is that information going to get to her? And so this is the kind of process we went through. So we kind of worked our way backwards there. So we started with, like, I think, character motivations and fleshing out the characters first. And then we kind of, like, went even back a step sort of up in the level, and, like, looked down a little bit more from the 30,000-foot view. And we're like, okay, how does this time loop work? What's the explanation? What happened in the past? What happened, what's happening in the future? All this kind of stuff. So it was definitely like we kind of worked our way backwards and got bigger and bigger in our sort of, like, concentric circles, if you will, to try and flesh out the lore. And I think ultimately that was a fun process. I actually kind of appreciate that better, because I think, like, if you start from the big picture, you can get bogged down in details that maybe have no bearing, or they don't guide you at all in the actual game, the hard sort of gameplay of the game. And this way we were sort of able to focus and really kind of devote our attention on explaining why things are the way they are as they exist already in the game. And so in that sense, like, it was a little more efficient and maybe less frustrating, I think, because I think, like, trust me, like, you can get bogged down writing Bibles and Bibles of material, and most of it never gets used. You end up seeing, like, the 10% iceberg, and the rest of it is, like, buried underwater. And in this case, like, there's definitely stuff buried underwater. And I think, like, what'll be kind of cool for players in this game is that we've given life into this world that you can't. Not all of it is there to be found, and some of it is left to implication, like, it's sort of implied, and other of it is, like, we've just kept it in the background, and we're not going to reveal. We didn't have the real estate to reveal in this game, and so hopefully, if the game does well, there'll be some, like, places we can go with it in the future. And I think it's always fun to have players speculate on what exactly is happening and what's the meaning behind certain things.
Exactly, that keeps the community very much alive. So that's really cool. All right, Bennett, thank you. I want to thank you very much for your time today, and I wish you also the best of luck in the coming weeks leading up to the launch of Deathloop. So thank you for today.
So much for having me.